A billionaire father thought money could give his daughter everything until a simple hug from a waitress showed him the one thing she truly needed. The restaurant was alive with the hum of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft rhythm of music playing from the corner speakers. It wasn't the kind of place where anyone wore suits or formal dresses. People came in wearing jeans, simple shirts, sometimes even sneakers, and that was exactly why he had chosen it. The billionaire father, who was known for living in a world of business meetings, luxury cars, and black tie events, wanted a night that felt normal. Tonight wasn't about money or status. Tonight was about his daughter. He glanced across the table at her. She was sitting with her small hands folded on her lap, her eyes lowered, trying to hide behind the loose strands of her hair. She was only 13, and though she had inherited his sharp features, her spirit was much softer. She never liked crowds, never liked to be the center of attention. And whenever people looked her way, she would shrink into herself. He had seen this many times before at family gatherings, at school events, and now again tonight. The father sighed quietly, adjusting the expensive watch on his wrist, not because he needed to check the time, but because he was fighting the habit of letting work steal his focus. Normally, his evenings were filled with phone calls and urgent decisions, numbers flashing across screens, and assistants running in and out with papers for him to sign. But tonight he had left his phone in the car. Tonight was only for her. The waiter had already brought their food. Simple meals compared to what they usually ate at private clubs or luxury restaurants. A plate of spaghetti for her, a steak for him. He wanted her to feel comfortable, like this was just another family out to enjoy dinner together. And in a way, he wanted to feel it to what it was like to be a normal father, without all the wealth forming an invisible wall between them and the rest of the world. But even in this simple setting, he could see the walls his daughter had built inside herself. While other children at nearby tables laughed loudly and even danced near the small open area in the middle of the restaurant, his daughter only stared down at her food. Sometimes her eyes flicked toward the little group of kids dancing to the music, but she quickly looked away again, as if even watching them made her nervous. He noticed the way her fingers played with the fork, tapping lightly against the edge of the plate, betraying the tension she felt. She wanted to join them, he realized. She wanted to get up and move to the music, to laugh and spin like they did. But fear held her back. He knew that fear. It wasn't just shyness, it was the constant voice in her head telling her that if she tried, everyone would stare, everyone would judge. The father leaned back in his chair, his chest tightening. For years he had believed that giving his daughter everything, every comfort, every luxury, every opportunity was enough. But money couldn't buy her courage. Money couldn't buy her confidence. Money couldn't lift her out of that chair and make her believe she belonged. And he didn't know how to do it either. Around them, the restaurant buzzed. A couple at the next table laughed loudly over shared desserts. A birthday party at the far corner filled the room with claps and cheers. The music grew a little louder, a lively tune that made even the waiters move their shoulders as they carried trays of drinks. He watched his daughter's lips press together as though she wanted to smile, but was afraid to. Then the waitress came by. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with a bright smile and kind eyes that carried warmth, even on a busy night. She set down a glass of water on their table and glanced at the girl. "You're awfully quiet tonight," she said gently, not in a way that embarrassed her, but as though she was talking to a little sister. The girl looked up quickly, her cheeks turning pink. "I'm fine," she whispered. Her voice so soft, it was nearly drowned out by the music. The father opened his mouth, ready to answer for her, but he stopped himself. He realized this was her moment, not his. The waitress leaned on the edge of the table for a second, her smile not fading. "I saw you looking at the kids dancing," she said, her tone playful. "They're pretty good, huh? I can't dance like that either. I'd probably trip over my own feet." The girl gave a tiny laugh, so small the father almost didn't hear it, but he saw it, that spark. It was the first time all evening she had let herself relax. "Don't worry," the waitress added, straightening up. "You don't have to be a dancer to have fun. Sometimes just watching is the best part." She gave the girl a wink before heading off to another table. The father's chest ached as he watched. It was such a small moment, just a passing comment from a stranger, but it had reached her in a way he never managed to. He had spent years trying to protect her from the world. But maybe what she needed was someone showing her. The world wasn't as scary as she thought. He picked up his fork and took a bite of his steak, though he barely tasted it. His mind was far away, thinking about all the times he had seen his daughter hide from life and how powerless he felt to help her. For all his billions, all his influence, he couldn't give her the one thing she needed most: the freedom to simply be herself. His daughter twirled her spaghetti slowly, her eyes once again drifting toward the group of kids dancing. The smallest smile tugged at her lips this time, though she quickly bit it back. The father noticed. He always noticed, even if she thought he didn't. The music shifted to a slower tune, and a few parents joined their children in the little dance area. The sight made his daughter stiffen, shoulders pulling up as though the very idea of being asked to dance filled her with panic. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that she didn't need to dance if she didn't want to, but the words stuck in his throat. He didn't want to embarrass her further. Instead, he just watched. He watched the way she fidgeted with the napkin, the way her eyes darted around to make sure no one was looking at her, the way her entire body seemed to shrink into the chair. She was scared. Scared of being seen, scared of standing out, scared of failing, and he felt helpless. For once in his life, he couldn't solve the problem with money or influence. He couldn't hire someone to teach her confidence. He couldn't buy her the bravery to step out on the dance floor. This wasn't a business deal he could negotiate. It was his daughter's heart, fragile and uncertain. And all he could do was sit there and hope she would one day see how special she truly was. The restaurant lights reflected softly on the father's face as he sat in silence. He looked at her, really looked at her not as the quiet girl who hid behind her hair, but as his daughter, his only child, the most important person in his world. He realized then how much he wanted her to feel free, to laugh without fear, to dance without shame. But for now, she just sat quietly, holding her fork like it was a shield, watching others live the moment she was too scared to join, and all he could do was wait. The music in the restaurant grew brighter, and laughter echoed across the room as more people joined in the fun. The father sat still, his fork resting on the plate, his eyes never leaving his daughter. She was so quiet, so tense, and he could see the way her shoulders trembled slightly whenever her gaze slipped toward the small group of children dancing. It was as if she wanted to join but couldn't. As if something heavy kept pulling her back into her chair, the waitress passed by again, carrying a tray of drinks for another table, and she paused when she noticed the girl sitting so silently. Her instincts, shaped by years of watching families come and go, told her that something wasn't quite right. Most kids in the restaurant couldn't sit still when the music was playing. They laughed, danced, or begged their parents to let them join the others. But this girl just sat frozen, almost as though she was afraid of being noticed. The waitress leaned closer with a warm smile. "Hey there," she said gently, addressing the girl. "I bet you like music, don't you?" The girl glanced up, startled, her cheeks flushing pink. "A little," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the music. The father tilted his head slightly, surprised to hear her respond at all. Normally she avoided speaking to strangers, especially in busy places. The waitress nodded playfully, setting down a napkin near the edge of the table. "I thought so. You were watching them dance, weren't you?" She gestured with her chin toward the small group of kids twirling and jumping near the open space in the middle of the room. The girl quickly looked away, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. "I wasn't," she said softly. But the redness in her cheeks betrayed her. The waitress laughed gently, not mocking, but warm and kind. "That's okay. I watched them too. They're brave, you know. It's not easy to get up in front of people and move around like that. I'd probably trip over myself." She gave an exaggerated wobble, pretending as though she might stumble, and for the first time the girl let out a small, shy giggle. The father's heart squeezed. That tiny giggle, so rare and fragile, was like sunlight breaking through a heavy cloud. He watched his daughter cover her mouth quickly, as if embarrassed for letting her laughter slip out. But the waitress noticed and grinned wider. "You know," the waitress continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, Everyone out there is probably nervous too. They just pretend not to be. That's the trick. Pretend you're not scared, and after a while, you forget you were scared in the first place. The girl's eyes flicked back toward the dancers, lingering just a little longer this time before she turned away again. "I can't," she whispered. "I'll look stupid." The father felt the words pierce straight through him. He wanted to jump in, to tell her she would never look stupid, that she was perfect the way she was. But he didn't speak. For once he knew this wasn't his moment. His voice had always been too heavy, too commanding, shaped by years of being a man people listened to. She didn't need a father's speech. She needed gentle reassurance, something soft, something she could believe without pressure. The waitress crouched slightly, so she was closer to the girl's eye level. "You know what's funny?" she said, her eyes sparkling. "When I was your age, I felt the same way. I never danced at parties, not once. I was so scared people would laugh at me. But then one day I realized something: most people are too busy worrying about themselves to worry about you. They're all wondering, do I look silly? Am I doing this wrong? They're not thinking about you at all." The girl blinked at her, as though those words were a completely new idea. "Besides," the waitress added with a playful grin, "even if you did look silly, that's half the fun. Dancing is supposed to be silly sometimes." The girl lowered her head, but the tiniest of smiles tugged at her lips. Her fingers twisted the napkin in her lap, the way she always did when she was nervous but secretly pleased. The father's throat tightened. He had told his daughter countless times that she was beautiful, that she was strong, that she had nothing to fear. But she never seemed to believe him. Maybe his words felt like a father's duty, like something he was supposed to say. But now, hearing kindness from a stranger, a simple waitress who had no reason to care, his daughter seemed to actually listen. The waitress placed a gentle hand on the edge of the table, her eyes still warm and encouraging. "You don't have to dance if you don't want to," she said softly. "It's not about forcing yourself. It's about knowing that you could if you wanted to, and that nothing bad would happen. You'd just be a kid having fun like the rest of them." The girl didn't answer, but her eyes darted once more toward the kids, and this time she didn't look away as quickly. She watched as two little boys spun each other around clumsily, falling to the floor in laughter. While a girl in a pink dress tried to copy a move she'd probably seen in a music video, none of them looked graceful, none of them looked perfect, but they looked happy. The father noticed the change in his daughter's expression. Her fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else: longing. The waitress straightened up, giving her a kind smile before heading back toward the counter. "Think about it," she said with a wink. "If I can trip over my own feet and laugh about it, so can you." The father exhaled slowly, realizing he had been holding his breath the entire time. His eyes followed the waitress as she walked away, silently grateful for her kindness. She didn't know them, didn't know the life they lived, didn't know how much his daughter needed to hear those words. Yet she had stopped, taken a moment, and given exactly what was needed. The girl picked up her fork again, twirling her spaghetti, but he noticed her movements had changed. They were slower, calmer, as though her mind was somewhere else, replaying what the waitress had said. Every few moments her eyes would flick back toward the dance floor, then quickly down at her plate, as if she were fighting an invisible battle with herself. The father wanted to reach across the table and hold her hand, to tell her how proud he was of her, even for just considering the idea of standing up. But he stayed silent, letting her process the moment in her own way. Around them, the restaurant grew busier, the laughter louder, the music faster. A little boy stumbled into a chair as he tried to spin, and everyone nearby laughed in good humor. No one mocked him, no one judged him. It was just part of the fun. The father wished his daughter could see it that way. Maybe, just maybe, the waitress's words had planted a seed. The girl finally lifted her eyes and looked directly at her father. For a moment, he thought she might ask him to dance, or at least to walk with her to the edge of the floor. But instead, she only gave him a small, uncertain smile before lowering her gaze again. It was enough. For the first time that night, he saw a tiny flicker of confidence in her. It wasn't much, but it was there. And as he watched her quietly gather courage piece by piece, he felt both pride and an ache in his chest. Pride because she was braver than she realized. Ache because he knew how hard every little step was for her. This was only the beginning. But it was a beginning he would never forget. The music shifted again, this time softer, almost playful. And the little group of children dancing near the center of the restaurant kept moving as though nothing else in the world mattered. They spun, clapped, and laughed loudly, their faces glowing with freedom. The father watched his daughter staring at them, her fork motionless in her hand. He could see the struggle inside her, the way her lips pressed together, the way her eyes darted back and forth like she was fighting with herself. The waitress noticed too. She came back, balancing a tray on one hand, but this time she didn't walk past. She set the tray down on the counter nearby and returned to the girl's table with a smile. She crouched again, lowering herself so she wasn't towering over the shy child. The father held his breath, curious to see what she would do next. "You know," the waitress said softly, her tone gentle and kind, "you don't look silly at all sitting here. But you do look like you're carrying something heavy inside. Like you want to be out there, but something is holding you back." The girl froze, her big eyes wide with surprise, as though the waitress had read her mind. She looked down quickly, twisting her napkin in her hands until it almost tore. "I can't," she whispered. The waitress tilted her head. "Why not?" The girl's voice was barely audible. "Everyone will look at me." The waitress's expression softened. She reached out slowly, not forcing anything, just laying her hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "It's okay to feel that way," she said kindly. "Do you know something? I used to feel the same. I was scared people would laugh at me. But do you want to know what I learned?" The girl's eyes lifted just slightly, curiosity flickering through the fear. "I learned that the people who really matter won't laugh at you. They'll cheer for you. And the people who do laugh, they don't matter at all." The waitress smiled warmly, her voice almost like a secret shared between friends. "And besides, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." The girl bit her lip, her eyes shiny now, as though tears were close. She didn't know what to say. For so long she had hidden behind silence whenever she felt afraid. She had never admitted it so openly before, not even to her father. But here was this stranger, saying exactly the words she had needed to hear. The father sat completely still, his chest tight. He felt like an outsider to a private, delicate moment unfolding right in front of him. The waitress leaned a little closer. "You know what's even braver than dancing?" she asked softly. The girl blinked. "What?" "Telling someone you're scared," the waitress replied. "And you just did that. That makes you one of the bravest people here." The girl's lips parted slightly, her breath caught. For the first time that night, she lifted her eyes fully and met the waitress's gaze. And then it happened. The waitress opened her arms slightly, not forcing anything, just an invitation. The girl hesitated, her body stiff, but then she leaned forward. Slowly, almost timidly, she let herself fall into the waitress's arms. The waitress hugged her gently. It's like holding something fragile and precious. She didn't squeeze too tight, didn't make it dramatic, just wrapped her arms around her in the kind of embrace that said, "You are safe. You are not alone." The girl's face pressed against the waitress's shoulder, and for the first time that evening, her body relaxed. Her little hands, clenched in fear before, now rested softly against the waitress's arm. The father's eyes blurred instantly. He tried to blink it away, but the tears came faster than he expected. His throat ached, and he clenched his jaw, but he couldn't stop it. He was watching his daughter open up in a way he hadn't seen in years. Not to him, but to someone who had shown her kindness with no strings attached. The sight broke him. All the years, he had worked endlessly, building empires, providing everything she could ever want. Yet somehow missing these small but vital moments, those years came crashing down on him now. Because in that simple hug, he saw what his daughter truly needed. Not money, not gifts, not the finest schools or clothes. She needed understanding. She needed kindness. She needed someone to remind her that she wasn't broken. Her fears didn't make her weak. The waitress whispered something softly into the girl's ear. Words the father couldn't hear. But whatever it was, the girl let out a shaky laugh. It's a kind that escapes when someone feels a sudden relief after holding in too much. She pulled back just slightly, her cheeks flushed, but her eyes brighter. "You're okay," the waitress said with a smile, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "You're stronger than you think." The girl nodded, not fully believing it yet, but wanting to. The waitress gave her one last squeeze before standing up again. She didn't make a big show of it, didn't draw attention. She just smiled at the father, giving him a small nod as if to say, "She'll be all right." Then she walked back to her work, blending into the noise and busyness of the restaurant. But the father couldn't move. His hands were clenched on the table, his chest tight with emotions he hadn't let himself feel in so long. The tears rolled down his face silently, and he didn't care who saw. His daughter looked at him, startled at first, then softened. "Daddy, are you crying?" she asked in a small voice. He laughed shakily, wiping his face quickly but failing to stop the tears. "Yeah," he admitted. "I think I am." She tilted her head, confused. "Why?" He reached across the table, taking her small hand in his. "Because I'm proud of you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And because I love you more than anything in this world." The girl's eyes filled with tears too, but this time they weren't from fear. She squeezed his hand tightly, her lips curving into a shy but genuine smile. For the first time that night, she didn't look away from him. She held his gaze, letting him see her completely. And he realized just how much that hug from a stranger had unlocked something in her heart. The music in the background kept playing. Laughter echoed, dishes clattered in the kitchen. But for the father and daughter, the whole restaurant seemed to fade away. In that moment, there was nothing else, just the bond between them. Fragile yet stronger than ever, renewed by an act of kindness they would never forget. The father sat frozen in his chair long after the waitress walked away, his daughter's small hand still resting in his. The warmth of her touch felt different now. It wasn't just a daughter holding her father's hand. It was a child quietly telling him she needed him, that she trusted him. And that simple gesture shook him to his core. Tears had already stained his face, and he didn't even try to hide them anymore. His whole life he had been the man people looked up to, the man who made decisions without hesitation, who walked into rooms and commanded attention. In the boardroom he was strong, unshakable, never showing weakness. But here, in the middle of a noisy restaurant, he couldn't hold it together. His heart was open, raw. It felt like all the walls he had built around himself were crumbling. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was so young, so delicate, her hair falling gently over her cheeks, her shy eyes flicking up at him every now and then, as though to check if he was still watching. She had no idea how much power she held over him. She didn't know that she was the only reason he worked so hard, the only reason he pushed himself to build everything he had. But at the same time, he realized something painful. He had been giving her everything except what she needed most. For years, he had thought love meant providing. The best schools, the safest home, clothes from the most expensive stores, toys before she even thought to ask for them. He thought that by surrounding her with comfort, he was protecting her from the struggles he had once known himself. But what he had missed was this. Money could buy things, but it could not buy courage. It could not buy laughter. It could not buy the feeling of safety that came from being seen and understood. He thought of all the times. He had been too busy to notice her quietness. All the moments he had been buried in his phone, while she sat across from him, waiting for his attention. He thought of the birthday parties where he had arrived late, carrying expensive gifts but missing the candles being blown out. He thought of school recitals he had sat through distracted, checking his emails instead of watching her try to sing her part softly on stage. He had been there, but not really there. Now he wondered if that was why she had grown so shy, so afraid of being seen. Maybe she had learned early on that she wasn't the center of his world, that even her father's eyes were often elsewhere, and the thought cut him deeply. More painful than any business loss he had ever faced, the waitress's hug replayed in his mind. It had been so natural, so simple, yet so powerful. A stranger had seen his daughter, truly seen her, in a way he had failed to. And that kindness had opened a door he couldn't unlock himself. Watching his daughter melt into that hug, trusting someone she didn't even know. made him realize how much she had been carrying inside. The father wiped his face again, his tears refusing to stop. He squeezed his daughter's hand gently. "You're so brave," he whispered, though she only looked at him with wide eyes, unsure of what he meant. He remembered her words, "Everyone will look at me. I'll look stupid." How many times had he felt the same in his own way? Standing in front of powerful men, investors who could change the course of his life with a single word, he had often felt like a scared little boy pretending to be strong. He had hidden it behind confidence, behind numbers and strategies. But inside he had known fear too. Maybe that's why her words had broken him so easily. He saw himself in her, but she was still a child. She shouldn't have to carry that kind of fear yet. She should be laughing, carefree, dancing without caring who was watching. He took a deep breath and leaned closer to her. "You know," he said softly, "when I was your age, I was scared too." Her eyebrows lifted, surprised. "You?" He nodded slowly, a sad smile on his face. "Yes, I was scared of everything. Talking to people, standing in front of the class, even trying new things. I thought everyone would laugh at me, and sometimes they did. But I kept going. Little by little, I learned that what matters most is not what people think of you, but how you feel about yourself." She stared at him silently, her lips parted slightly, as though she was hearing him in a new way. "And you," he added, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "are stronger than I ever was. You don't even know how amazing you are, but I see it. I see it every day." Her cheeks turned pink and she looked down shyly, but she didn't pull her hand away. The father's chest ached as he realized how long it had been since they had spoken like this. Honest, raw, without him rushing off to another call or her hiding behind silence. It felt like he was finally connecting with her. Heart to heart, the music in the background picked up again, and more kids joined the dancing. Some twirled clumsily, some jumped up and down, not caring at all how silly they looked. The father watched them, then glanced at his daughter. He could see the longing in her eyes again, the way she wanted to be part of it, but still held herself back. He knew he couldn't force her, but he could be there, beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "Do you want to try?" he asked gently, not pushing, just offering. Her eyes widened and she shook her head quickly. "I can't." He smiled softly. "That's okay. You don't have to. But if you ever do, I'll be right there with you." Her lips quivered, as though she wanted to cry again, but instead she gave him the tiniest nod. That nod was enough. It was a promise, a step, a sign that maybe one day she would be ready. The father leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. His emotions still overwhelmed him, but beneath the tears was a new feeling, hope. He felt like he had been given another chance. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could change what came next. He could be present, really present for her. He could give her the attention she deserved, the support she needed, the love she longed for. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Confidence didn't grow overnight. But tonight, something had shifted. A waitress's hug had opened a door. And now, it was his job to keep walking through it with her. He reached for his glass of water, his hand trembling slightly. He took a sip, steadying himself, then looked at his daughter again. She was still quiet, still shy, but there was a new light in her eyes. A softness, a spark. She smiled at him, small, hesitant, but real. And for him, that smile was everything. He didn't care about the business deals waiting for him tomorrow. He didn't care about the endless meetings or the contracts stacked on his desk. In this moment, the only thing that mattered was her, his daughter, his little girl. He made a silent promise then, sitting there in that noisy restaurant with tears still drying on his cheeks. He promised he would never let her feel invisible again. He would never let her believe she wasn't enough. He would be the father she needed, not just the provider she had always known, as he held her hand tighter. He realized he wasn't just proud of her. He was also grateful. Grateful for her honesty, for her courage, and even for her fear. Because it had reminded him of something he had forgotten, that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being there, fully, even in the messy, fragile moments. And for the first time in a long time, he He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The plates on their table were almost empty now, the last bits of spaghetti and steak pushed to the side. The restaurant still hummed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the music that had never stopped since they arrived. Children were still dancing in the middle of the room, their joy filling the space with something warm and free. But at their small corner table, everything felt different. It wasn't just dinner anymore. It was a memory being carved into their hearts. The father sat back, watching his daughter sip from her glass of water. She was calmer now, her shoulders less tense, her movements slower, more relaxed. Her eyes even lifted more often, catching glimpses of the dancers without shrinking away immediately. Something had shifted in her tonight. Something small but powerful. He smiled at her, and she smiled back, shy but real. That smile was worth more to him than all the money he had ever earned. He knew he would remember it for the rest of his life. The waitress passed by again, balancing another tray, and gave the girl a small wave. The girl hesitated, then lifted her hand just a little, waving back with the tiniest grin. The father caught that moment and felt his heart swell. His daughter, who always avoided attention, had acknowledged a stranger in front of people without hiding. It was such a small gesture, but to him it was a victory. When the waitress came to clear their plates, the father looked up at her, his eyes still red but steady now. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice heavy with meaning. The waitress gave him a puzzled smile. "For the meal?" He shook his head slowly. "No. For what you did for my daughter." His voice trembled slightly. "You may not realize it, but that hug, it meant more than I can ever explain." The waitress's smile softened. She looked at the girl, who blushed and glanced down at her lap. Then she looked back at the father. "Sometimes," she said gently, "people just need someone to remind them they're not alone." Her words sank deep into him. He nodded, unable to say more, because if he did, he knew the tears would come again. When the waitress left, the father leaned across the table, resting his hand on his daughter's. "She's right, you know," he said softly. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone. I'm always with you, no matter what." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't the tears of fear. They were the tears of a child who felt safe, who felt loved. She nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. The music changed again, something slow and light, and a few couples got up to dance, parents with their children, husbands with wives. The father watched them for a moment, then looked at his daughter. "Do you want to try?" he asked again, his voice calm, without pressure. She looked at the dance floor, then back at him. Her lips parted like she wanted to say yes, but then she shook her head quickly. "Not today," she whispered. He smiled warmly. "That's okay," he said. "Another time," and he meant it. He wasn't disappointed. He wasn't frustrated. He understood now that bravery didn't always mean jumping into the spotlight. Sometimes bravery was just sitting a little taller, smiling at a stranger, or letting yourself believe that you were safe. Tonight, she had already been brave in so many small ways, and that was enough. When the check came, the father signed it quietly, leaving a tip far larger than the bill itself. It wasn't about showing off his wealth. It was his way of saying thank you to the waitress, of honoring the moment she had given his daughter. Money couldn't measure the gift she had given them, but it was all he had to offer in return. As they got ready to leave, the father helped his daughter with her coat. She slipped her small arms through the sleeves, her cheeks still pink from all the emotions of the night. He held the door open for her, and as they stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around them. The sky above was dotted with stars. The night quiet compared to the laughter they had just left behind. They walked slowly toward the car. Normally she would rush ahead, eager to hide away, but tonight she stayed close to him, her hand slipping naturally into his. He looked down at her and smiled, squeezing her hand gently. She didn't pull away. The father unlocked the car and they got inside. For a while, neither of them spoke. The car was filled with a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need words. Finally, as he started the engine, his daughter's small voice broke the quiet. "Daddy?" she said softly. "Yes." She looked down at her hands, fiddling with the ends of her sleeves. "Do you think I'll ever be brave enough to dance?" The father's heart ached at the question, but he smiled. "I don't think," he said gently. "I know." She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching his face for truth. "Because," he continued, "bravery doesn't mean you never feel scared. It means you don't let the fear stop you forever. And you already showed me tonight how brave you are." Her lips curved into a small smile. She leaned back against the seat, her shoulders loosening, as though his words gave her comfort. The drive home was quiet, the city lights glowing around them. The father kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, memorizing her peaceful face. He thought about how close he had come to missing this night, how easily he could have let work steal it away. But he hadn't. He had been here, and now this memory would live in him forever. When they reached home, he parked the car and walked with her to the door. Inside, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that often made her feel small. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt warm. Before going upstairs, she turned and hugged him suddenly. It wasn't long or dramatic, just a quick, tight hug, but it stunned him. She almost never hugged first. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. He froze, then wrapped his arms around her tightly. "I love you too," he said, his voice breaking again. She pulled back, smiled shyly, then ran upstairs, her footsteps light. The father stood there in the hallway, his eyes wet again. He let out a shaky breath and smiled. Tonight had changed everything. It wasn't about a dance. It wasn't about a restaurant. It wasn't even about the hug from the waitress, though that moment had started it all. It was about his daughter finally letting herself be seen, and about him finally realizing that being a father was more than just providing. It was about presence, patience, and love in the quietest moments. As he turned off the lights and sat alone for a while, he thought of the waitress again. She would probably never know the depth of what she had done tonight. To her, it was a simple act of kindness. To him and his daughter, it was a turning point. A reminder that the world could be gentle, that strangers could bring light when you least expected it, and he knew he would never forget it.